Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today, and thank you to you and the thousands of FBI agents who are right now out there trying to keep us safe. I think we've often failed to express our gratitude to law enforcement, and I know how dedicated and hardworking they are. So that is something that should go without saying, but it's worth saying. Mr. Director, I want to focus on election interference, which is, in my view, one of the most pressing and important threats to our democracy. That election interference threatens particularly the presidential election in 2024. There's a lot of talk about the dire effects, potentially, of the outcome in 2024, and the countries of China, Russia, other foreign adversaries. We're not talking here about Hamas or a terrorist organization, nation states interfering in our election process to pick winners that are more favorable to them. There's no secret here, no mystery about who would be more favorable to Vladimir Putin or to Xi in Ukraine or Taiwan. And I'd like to know from you whether you view election interference by these nations as a potential threat in the coming presidential election.
We're keenly focused on the risk that foreign adversaries, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, whether it's Iran or others, would seek to interfere in our elections.
You've said that all threats are elevated at exactly the same time. This one seems to me much more elevated than we've seen in any recent election. Am I right?
I think it's fair to say that they are elevated from where they were before. And just to elaborate just slightly on that point, obviously we saw, and it's not disputed, that the Russians tried to interfere in the 2016 election and then continued. But what we've seen since then is other adversaries attempting to take a page out of the Russians' playbook, which is why, for example, I point to the press conference that Director Ratcliffe and I did in the fall of 2020 about the Iranians' efforts to interfere in that election. More recently, we've had an indictment involving the Chinese government attempting in a very aggressive way to interfere in a particular congressional candidacy. First trying to dig up dirt on the candidate, then when they couldn't find it, to make up dirt on the candidate, and then when they couldn't find that, openly talking about how to inflict physical violence on the candidate. That's a pretty stark form of election interference.
You are focused rightly on this problem as an urgent and exigent one for the United States of America, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what can we do in Congress to support this effort? What additional powers do you need? Do you need more resources? It seems to me that our democracy is on the line here. And all of the speech making, all of the rhetoric that we're expressing today go for naught if we lose our democracy because China, Russia, Iran, these nation states have a free field to interfere with our election.
Well, I think there's a couple things. There's, on the money side, in terms of appropriations, we are not in an environment where any of the threats that we're seeing as part of my exchange with Senator Graham are going backwards. They're all elevated and increasing. So now is not a time to go backwards in terms of the funding of the FBI across cyber, counterintelligence, and a whole host of other issues. But second, we've talked about 702. 702 is, of course, focused on foreign adversaries, many of these same intelligence services, and their ability to engage in malicious foreign intelligence operations. And that's why reauthorizing 702 in a forum where it can be used is important to that threat among a whole host of other foreign threats.
There are now Fifth Circuit decisions. The courts are making decisions that, if upheld, would create additional obstacles to your enforcement against foreign interference. Are you concerned about the Fifth Circuit saying, in effect, that you can't communicate with social media to alert them to threats?
Well, of course, as you know, this is the subject of ongoing litigation. The findings of the lower courts in that litigation are things that are hotly contested through the department's filings. As you know, the department has asked the Supreme Court to not only stay that injunction, but to grant cert, and it has done both. I will say, and I think this is important for people to know, it is not seriously disputed that our foreign adversaries have tried and are continuing to try to interfere in our elections. And it is not seriously disputed that those foreign adversaries are using social media, including U.S. social media platforms, as part of that effort. And historically, our work in this space has enjoyed widespread bipartisan support. In fact, President Trump himself, rightly, in 2018 or 19, issued an executive order on this very subject, calling it a national emergency. SISI, the Senate Intelligence Committee, on an overwhelmingly bipartisan basis, identified much the same and called for more engagement with social media companies, not less. The key is making sure that it's done in the right way, and that's what we're committed to do. Focus on the hidden hand of the foreign actor, not on the content itself posted.
But just so everyone is aware, Director Wray, Facebook announced, and I'm quoting, that the threat sharing by the federal government in the U.S. related to foreign election interference has been paused since July, end quote. That is a profoundly troubling change that threatens our national security. The FBI and other law enforcement and intelligence agencies are, in effect, handicapped. They are straitjacketed by this ruling, and on that score and on so many other areas where election interference is not just imminent, it's ongoing. It's real and urgent, a clear and present ongoing threat to our democracy. And I hope that my colleagues will heed your warning. It's expressed in characteristically understated terms, but I think it is a profoundly important warning to this committee and to the country. Let me ask you about, just in the brief time I have left, hate crimes, the rising incidents. I am deeply disturbed, as are many of my colleagues, about what's happening on college campuses. Free speech has a place, obviously, on campuses. Intimidation, physical threats, violence do not. Are you satisfied that the leadership of our colleges and universities are doing enough to stop violence and physical intimidation?
Well, it's hard to paint with a broad brush. I know that we are working more closely than ever with leadership of universities to try to increase their awareness and their resolve on this subject. And we now have campus liaison responsibilities assigned to a specific agent in every field office to try to, as part of that effort. And certainly we have seen transnational repression, for example, from some of these same foreign adversaries we were just talking about occurring on campuses and not just in other parts of America.
Have you seen Hamas do that?
I'd have to think about that one.
Maybe you can respond in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, welcome.